So, hi everyone. I've got some good news. I've written the first chapter of my novel, The Red Thread, and I'll leave some details below about the novel itself, how I've sketched it out. But this is the first chapter, so it establishes some important themes, elements of voice and characterization, and so on for the novel. So, I'll read it to you. It's called The Boyfriend from Chimalhuacan, which is an area of Mexico City. The boyfriend from Chimalhuacan. Vin met Ellie one March 15 years ago, a night at a sonidero, a big outdoor event, in something like an open rodeo field on the outskirts of Ciudad Nezahualcóyotl, Mexico State. The music was loud enough to shake the pavement, bass pulsing through bodies packed close. Vin felt awkward. An Australian brought here, just on the fly, by their PhD student, Kylie. Her name itself a calling card for the trans girls she'd come to write about. Working class vestidas, dancing together among the throng. Vin did their best to copy their moves, trying to dance cumbia without any sense of rhythm, backpack strapped to their chest like armor. In the days, Vin makes out a handsome man, brown skin, deep eyes staring at Vin, a smile that moves with the beat. Later, he told Vin he was Mixtec. Where from? Oaxaca, La Mixteca Alta, of course. But there, in the dusty light, with few bearings, Ellie shouts of beer, Vin to a beer. Taking buches de chela, while both swig tequila straight from the bottle, shouting words over the music in half comprehension. Ellie asks if Vin is from Argentina. Vin says no, but Ellie doesn't believe it. Maybe the Spanish sounded strange somewhat, vowels strewn across articulation or with their own spooky concordance. Maybe it was Vin's paleness, but dark features. A placemat for don't know what or who, but I like. They danced. They kissed. Eli looked like a rough around the edges cowboy. Vin is hopeless around such a display. And his eyes, two red flares at the edges of the whites like someone possessed. But it is Vin that is possessed, following his moves as if drawn by a long thread. When the night finally winds down, Eli takes Vin to his place on Marietta Street. The street name would come later. Vin doesn't really know where they are, but it doesn't matter. Everything is rhythm, smoke, wanting. Eli's skin is a map, tattoos that speak of war, of origin, of something Vin doesn't understand but wants to trace. Along his waist, or around his waist as Eli undresses, Vin spots a long red thread. Vin didn't ask why, only followed its path, with lips thirsty for him, for the night, for whatever they'd conjured up, leaving Kylie well behind. They wake in the dusty heat of morning, tangled, tongues dry. There is no toilet, just a hole in the floor. No shower, just a plastic bucket and a metal element to heat the water. Vin doesn't mind. Not yet. Vin is still inside the story, inside Ellie's body, inside something that can't quite be named. Stepping out into the street, sunlight strikes like a blade. Neighbours look up, surprised but not unkind. Who is this stranger emerging from the shadows, rumpled, blinking, still marked by the night before? No one says anything. Agua, por favor. Vin makes their way back to Kylie's place, head pounding, mouthful of metal, the thrum of tequila and longing still reverberating. It seemed like it had just been one night. Surely nothing would come of it. But Ellie, only hours later, followed. Back at Kylie's place, she offers Vin a drink and some paracetamol. You left early. Did you go home with that dark stranger? Kylie asks jokingly. She already knows Ellie somehow, but not well. She's seen him about. The Vestida girls seem to approve. Yeah, who would have guessed it? Here I am paying you a visit and suddenly I'm off with someone. Me, of all people. A total monk. That's how things go down here, says Kylie, winking. Vin began to notice Ellie waiting on corners, trailing behind like a question. There was something tender about his persistence, but it unnerved Vin too. Friends called him Vin's puppy. When Eli became the boyfriend, his own friends teased him. You said Vin's from Sydney? More like Chimalhuacan. They laughed, and so did Eli. Or Ellie, I should say. Half ashamed, half proud. Yet, like an outline of a person, Vin knew very little about Ellie. Besides the contact that night. Vin had only come to Nessa to get to know the field, since Vin, as anthropologist, was Kylie's supervisor, and to find out how things were faring for Kylie, who'd come here just around the time that the swine flu broke out. During that month, everyone had to limit their movements. The military took over the streets, imposed order, but it didn't last long. Kylie was working on a project around class and transness, how they differed across social geographies of Greater Mexico City, home to some 22 million people. But she ended up making links in the adjoining bordering city of Nessa, actually located in Mexico State. And what about Ellie? It seemed a truncated name. Elias? Like alias. So much to uncover. Vin thought of asking him directly, but experience told Vin, not all at once. Yet Eli volunteered the information. I study Hebrew. Hebrew? Eli wasn't Jewish, surely? No, but it's an amazing language. Eli had studied at UNAM, the National University. First theatre and performance, and then taking on some language classes with a teacher from Israel. Why Hebrew? Vin asked, noticing a kind of script on his arm he hadn't seen before. It was in Hebrew and meant there is but one God. It's actually a transliteration from Deuteronomy. Vin remembered that from Sunday school classes, but it was important enough to inscribe it on his very flesh. Even if Eli did not seem overtly religious, he had a past as yet undisclosed. I like poetry, he said. You know Mario Benedetti? Vin nodded. How about Jaime Sabines? Then Eli quoted lines from the poem, Me doy cuenta de que me faltas. I realize that I need you. Looking intensely into Vin's eyes, he channeled Sabines. Me doy cuenta de que me faltas, de que te busco entre las gentes en el ruido, pero todo es inútil. I realize that I need you, that I look for you among people in the noise, but it's all useless. Yes, being in Mexico City might do that to someone lost in the maze. This was a hopeless romantic, though. Maybe with emphasis on hopeless? Ellie seemed downcast, yet Vin liked that. The melancholy of his gaze was mirrored in the wineglass Vin sipped. Vin didn't yet know Ellie, unless in the biblical sense. There is but one God. But Eli's friends Ellie's friend's comments notwithstanding, Vin wasn't the boyfriend from Chimalhuacan. Neither was Vin a boy, really, nor from Chimalhuacan. The boy question would come up much later. But the desire to belong was right there, indisputable. They had no family. What or where was home? Vin really had nothing to anchor them. Yes, an academic job back in Australia, but they weren't even from Sydney. And as for being mistaken for an Argentine, it wasn't the first time. Something about growing up in Perth's outer suburbs, coming from a mixed working class background, made Vin feel eternally out of place in the leafy inner west of Sydney and in academia, and eternally misplaced, passing for this or that. It was also unlikely, but old habits die hard. Nessa didn't seem so far away, even if Vin's fresa friends from La Condesa or Coyoacan, also academics, earnest intellectuals, many of them politically savvy, heroic, engaged, feared Nessa as other. Vin didn't. Kylie took Vin to one of her participants' homes, then another. This reminded Vin of their own family's ways of loss, grief, and remembrance. And being Catholic, well, in Mexico you're not in a minority. Even Las Vestidas were devout in their own way. One afternoon, Vin and Ellie, trespassed into mutually unknown territory. They met at a hotel, this time far from Nessa, in Roma Norte. The room was basic, white sheets smelling faintly of bleach. They had sex, slowly, with care, fingers laced together, body to body. It wasn't hurried, it was exact, a perfect fit. But later the question crept back in, the one Vin couldn't shake. What does Ellie want from me? This was another way of asking, can he see me? Vin thought it was like looking through a one-way mirror, but sometimes there was a crack, a chink that permitted a fuller view, only to be overshadowed. Was Vin a promise? What kind? A way out? If Vin was a promise, Vin thought, what on earth did they have to show for themselves? Maybe Ellie thought that being white, con estudios, a university prof no less, spoke for themselves. But Vin didn't see themselves that way. Yet who has a camera inside someone else's head? Just the surface, or as they say, amor a primera vista, counts. First impressions? The worst version of that saying was amor a primera visa, love at first visa. But neither even talked about any future. Ellie just seemed in trance and in the moment. Vin also. Yet Vin didn't trust this at all. It's not that Vin wasn't at both their physical and professional peak. Although 38, they were looking good. Eli, likewise, looked younger than his age, 35. In fact, this was Vin's first sabbatical, and they had a study on sexuality and migration already underway. But entre Latinos, back in Sydney, Australia. Too often people thought Vin was Latino, and this interest did little to dissuade that thought. But Vin was actually Anglo-Indian, or of Irish Bengali heritage. While in Roma, and yes, taking the metro de Roma a Coyoacan, Ellie took Vin to galleries, cafes, markets. Vin was overwhelmed, intoxicated. Oh, and then, yes, there were the bars. No one had paid them so much attention before. Not really, or not for years. Maybe it was just the sense of adventure, seeking out new places for both, that had them in some kind of trance. Yet Vin also thought about that red thread around Ellie's waist. How deeply sexy was it? Ellie had that Chang'o aspect, magnetic and profoundly present. This suave masculinity and an infectious laugh. There was no holding back on physical contact. In uptown mescalerias, they posed for strangers in front of colourful textile backdrops. Ellie's arm wrapped around Vin's body without hesitance. Intimacy. So that's what it was like. Vin felt whole, embraced, and for a moment less monstrous. All that after gulping down enmoladas with agua de Jamaica, kissing the smoky chocolate flavour off Eli's lips. Vin remembered the night in the dusty beery haze, spying a little diorama back at Eli's place. Above his bed, a drawing of a toy bear, on it. Ellie sleeps here, it said. Vin felt something akin to maternal instinct. Oh, this boy is so fucking precious. So, when as a parting gift, just prior to the end of Vin's 2-week sojourn in Mexico City, Ellie gifted Vin a pink hardback card with a little bear on it that said, "I love you." It was hard to pull away. Yet Sydney beckoned, a return to supposed normal life. At the airport, Ellie promised to write. Vin found the need to run into the toilet and cry. This was a surprise. They weren't given tears, but to hide it from Ellie. Where would things go? Where would things go now? Why was Vin leaving? And to what? Amor de lejos, amor de... Eli, 26th of March, 2020. April, I should say. 7:18. Don't be sad. I love you. I just want to be with you, nothing more. I know money is all you can give, and I'm sorry I spent what little I had. Right now, I'm very broke. I'm desperate in every way, but strong love is everything I have. I'll promise to manage. Medicines are expensive here, and I can't afford insurance to get out of the public system. You know how it is. But love is our priority. I'll take care of things the best I can. Tomorrow I'll get the results from my sugar test and I'll let you know. I love you, Vinny. Miss you. Vin. Next day. 27th. Same day. No, next day, 27th of April 2010. 1:41. Hello, love. Let me know how your tests go. Everything okay? Have a good day. I miss you and love you more than anything in the universe. Vin smiles and life smiles too. Love you. Eli. Ellie. Same day. 27th of April. 6:33. Typing. What are you doing, love? Why aren't you online? Today I went with Kylie to check on a legal matter, but the results weren't good. You know how corrupt Mexican politics can be. She kindly offered me her house if I needed to sleep or use the internet. It's very cute. I appreciate her kindness. The tests, well, I think it's just sugar and some joint pain from the weather. I'll be fine. I promise. Hopefully it won't be too expensive. My house is full of noise and fighting. Nobody talks to me. They party and gossip behind my back. Even so, I hope you come to Mexico. You'd earn what you deserve here and wouldn't have any trouble finding a job. Pray that my tests are okay. I love you so much. You're my real love, and I'll wait forever. Ellie, same day, later, at 5:50. Typing. I know you've been busy, but I can't stop myself from writing. How is school? I hope all is well. This morning I felt dizzy. I had a headache. My left arm hurt. I went to the doctor. My sugar was high. My heart was beating irregularly. The doctor said my sugar is a bit high and my heart has flaws. If I don't take care, I could risk a heart attack. So he told me to go to emergency. Can you help? My friends and family aren't doing much. Don't worry though, I'll be fine. Thinking about us being together soon comforts me. I'll keep you updated on the tests. For now, I'll just rest and think of you. I love you above all else. 1,000 kisses and hugs, forever yours. The messages were incessant, as were the emergencies. Vin had only been back in Sydney a month. Oh, sure, there were juramentos de amor, constant references to being together, daily, sometimes hourly, by messenger, by WhatsApp. It felt like Ellie was within the psychic life of Vin. Unstoppable. Yet Vin also dreamed of him, craved being reunited, even while holding back from the torrent of texts at times. But secretly, they lapped it up. The guy was interested. Vin liked to feel needed. The need was incessant. But whose? Vin, prone to fantasy, saw themselves in Greece as Sandy, played by Olivia Newton-John, pining over John Travolta's Danny Zuko, seeing his face in the outdoor pool. Vin, of all people, who'd ended every previous relationship, suddenly hopelessly devoted to you, or hopefully devoted. Either way, pretty unlikely. It was corny, to be sure, but in Mexico, so much was lost in the 1950s, or a version of the 1950s, some kind of post-war modernizing nostalgia. You saw it in the diners. Vin loved malteadas, malt shakes. Saw them as a trip back to the future, even some kind of way in which that Vin's own mother had dreamed, teenager in the 50s, to meet her own beau or rebel without a cause. In those months after returning to Sydney, they'd Skyped now and then, but the texts turned dire. A desperate hospitalization in Stata Medica, a private clinic in Nessa. The details, though, were sketchy. Ellie had diabetes, but why the sudden spikes in sugar? Why the emergency admission? At full cost. He reported having no feeling in his arm, had heart palpitations. It was necessary, though. Ellie needed Vin. A full cardio workup was in order. So Vin made a transferencia por Western. This pattern continued, as did the promises, not just of reunion, but noviazgo, then marriage, which, over successive months, from April to June, they talked about all the time. Ellie started to take Vin's surname in those frantic texts, added to his own, Perez Ryan. It was also tantalizing. This image of besotted love, but that would become some kind of bedrock among the moving pieces of Vin's life. Ellie called Vin his motor, his reason for living, and yet he frequently expressed desperation, depression. Vin, too, felt a kind of intense sadness. Eli related his disagreements with his father and siblings. He had no job. He had a job, I should say, trabajando como negro, as he put it, but lost it. His father, back at the place in Marietta Street, in the multifamiliar, group housing unit pressured him all the time for rent. Siblings taunted him. He had to hide in his room, yes, the one that said, Ellie sleeps here above his bed, just to block out their taunts. In fact, they openly trounced on his being, calling him useless, the younger son, gay, never embraced. Vin related to all this, not just the family rejection, but the sense of abandon. A tu suerte, to your luck, to your own devices, as they say in Spanish. Vin had trod that path many years earlier. Vin didn't tell Ellie about it, at least not then. It was too much to broach, too much to explain. But the bond, the identification, was palpable. Helpless, Vin decided that if no one was there for them way back then, surely this was a time to step up for Ellie. When Ellie's mother needed eye surgery, laser surgery, for her cataracts, Vin paid for it. When Ellie reported daily asaltos on buses in the danger zone, or Nessa, well, wasn't that just like where Vin had grown up? Came of age? The very place that Vin fled? The transfers by Western Union continued. This somehow pulled Vin closer, that red thread tightening. Yet so did the enchantment. Ellie had talents Vin could only hope for. The attention to detail in the embroidery he did on his shirts, for example, which he wore. It wasn't just a cowboy aesthetic, after all. How did you learn to do that? Ellie, Vin asks. Oh, from aunts, uncles back in el pueblo, in Tlacotepec Plumas. They're amazing. Do you just thread your own shirts or do designs for others? For anyone who wants it, Ellie answers. Ah, but that's not all. Do you want to see me dance? I can show you some steps. Baile folclórico. Vin blushed. This was something Vin could never aspire to, feeling awkward in their body. And Ellie had called them on it. You, Güero, cannot dance, he said, observing Vin that first night at the sonidero. Yet Ellie found that, what? Innocence? Somehow endearing. I also create decorations for quinceañeras, you know? Ellie continued, winking. In fact, I have a few primitas that are lining up for me to organize everything. It was inspiring. Eli's knowledge. I keep saying Eli. Ellie's knowledge, but not one that's abstract, like Vin's. Whether Vin was Sandy from Greece or not, Vin wanted him. But not only that, Vin became determined to return, because they could. Swing a grant, go back to Mexico. Because if they didn't, this thread might fray otherwise. It had to keep running. Finely, delicately. In a previous life, Vin had mocked the idea of marriage, much like the religion they rejected. Vin rejected anything like heterosexual matrimony, convention, enclosure. It was all subservience. So punk Vin was, kicking against the pricks. But coming from this boy's seemingly genuine texts, Vin had their own palpitations. Nothing Star Medica could attend to, of course. Perhaps Doctor Corazon, the 1950s radio callback line made famous by José Emilio Pacheco's narrator Carlos in Las Batallas en el Desierto, remembering his own love affair with a teacher many years older. Café Tacuba, one of Vin's favourite bands, even wrote a song about that love story that came to blows. Now, apart physically from Ellie, Vin would listen to Café Tacuba, but also to boleros. Vin's mum was a lover of all things Latin. before most other people in the first Latin wave, in small town Perth, that barely knew what a cappuccino was, and even knew and sung with her young cousin songs of Trio Los Panchos. So when Vin disclosed about this relationship, she approved of the entanglement. But why that word, entanglement? In English, to embroider can mean to invent, concoct, exaggerate. But any or all of that came, Vin thought, out of distance and loneliness. Vin surely felt it. Again, the corniness. Marriage? For fuck's sake. You know how that panned out for Vin's mother? Well, worse still, Nana? That's another story, Vin thought. Nana also embroidered, but in the literal sense. Yet these, perhaps, except via words, were gifts that Vin had not inherited. Boleros, Vin's mother's era, of course, yet also defining for Mexico's modernity. Then there was rock mexicano, so 1990s. Ellie and Vin shared these loves, even the band Maldita Vecindad. There's a photo of the two of them together, and Ellie is wearing the band's t-shirt. Vin knew the lyrics to all their songs. Perhaps Vin and Ellie were more similar than different. Yet, en su soledad, because Ellie and Vin always spoke in Spanish, texted in Spanish, from the moment they met, Vin got lost in the telenovelas style cursilería, even of J-Lo's attempts at a Spanish album produced by Mark Anthony when she was married to him. Those words from the song Apresúrate, Hurry Up Love, took on new meaning. Vin played them on repeat, that song amongst others, on their iPod. Vin shared it with Ellie, but he just nodded. He wasn't a J-Lo fan, it seems. Apresúrate, amor mío, que me pesan las memorias, que el recuerdo y el silencio no confundan nuestras cosas. Apresúrate que el tiempo vuela. Well, who was lost and needy here? The curse of being a Libran, perhaps, thought Vin, descabellado. Headless, heedless, looking for balance, but Vin bleached at the ridiculous of it all, living through some kind of ideal. But they were still drawn, the endless texts themselves, a thread pulling them along. That night in Nessa, when Vin and Ellie first met, stamped forever in Vin's mind and body. And also the other night in Roma, entangled. Maybe less memorias, except perhaps of possible futures to come? Surely las distancias, from Jenny of the Blocks, from the Blocks' Try It song, way more than the memories still to be formed. It was painful. Enough, Vin thought. Between semesters, they flew back, having bagged a conference date, and the school supported Vin. It was about their career, wasn't it? Not some kind of careening, out of control kind of thing, heart outside chest, hopeless in their own way.